Welcome to the ISE Content Studio here at ISE 2023 in Barcelona. Today we want to talk about democratizing content production. I have a special guest here, Dan Goldstein, Marketing Officer of Avixa. Welcome, Dan.
Great to be here.
Dan, one of the hottest trends here at ISE is democratizing broadcast technology. So what's all about it?
Well, I think historically, if you think about content production, you've really had two very, very separate layers, right? You've got the broadcast industry up here in terms of quality and in terms of price and availability. And then at the bottom, you've got everybody else on Teams calls and Zoom calls and Google Meet and so on and so forth, right? When we talk about the democratization of broadcast technology, what we mean is everything in between, this new layer that's emerging of content software, streaming platforms, graphic software, that sits on top of those collaboration tools, brings in the common streaming platforms that we're all familiar with, like YouTube and Facebook Live, Instagram, TikTok potentially, but adds a broadcast sensibility to those things. So think about PTZ cameras. Think about the way that motion graphics are so accessible now to so many more people. It's in its infancy. We're not yet at the stage where every company is a broadcast company or every company is an AV company, but the door is open and we can see what's on the other side of it.
And we see it also here in the studio. We have Unreal, which is a gaming engine, driving the content. We have PTZ cameras, all of this stuff. So it's really a bit disruption. It's almost like an IT industry, or?
It is absolutely. It's going to be, I think, very disruptive to the content creation community. I heard of a use case earlier this morning, actually. A food manufacturer. Food manufacturers employ a lot of chefs, and those chefs have never been featured in any of the internal communication of the company or any of the external marketing of the company. But it's too expensive, right, to make, it has been anyway, too expensive to make a TV show featuring your own celebrity chefs. Well, now you can. If you're not, the acquisition technology is coming down in price. As you say, the virtual production technology is coming down in price. You have all the possibilities of doing so much of it remotely. You don't need to fly, video crews and celebrities here, there, and everywhere. You don't have the costs of hotels and F&B and all that stuff. So we're at a point now where these companies can say, "Hey, we've got." This company can say, "We've got a new mayonnaise recipe, right? And we're going to get one of our chefs to show our staff just how good this is, and they're going to do their own. They're going to do their own TV show, and on top of that, afterwards, they can interact with staff over Teams or Zoom exactly the way you would in any kind of other collaborative meeting."
So basically, everyone becomes a broadcaster.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Well, okay, that broadcaster is a tricky word in my mind, because when I think of a broadcaster, I think of a broadcast company, right? I think of the BBC, or I think of Netflix, or I think of Sky Sports, right?
Or Media Pro.
Well, but Media Pro has a bit of a foot in both camps, right? And Media Pro is slightly different in that Media Pro is very big in broadcast, but also has corporate clients, and is in some sense also an AV company. And there are quite a few companies like that emerging now. But I also think that equally, as you go thinking of that gap again, as you go further down, other companies are just going to say, well, our needs are relatively modest. This is only for internal communication. We just want to put on a TV show. We want to put a CEO in front of a virtual background. We want to make them look more interesting than they really are. And we're going to have great graphics, and we're going to have picture-in-picture, and we're going to do all this clever stuff. And we can do it ourselves. And because it's not for broadcast, right? If the need is just internal communication, you don't necessarily need that big broadcast capability.
I agree, and that's one of the fastest growing segments, I think, is really corporate. We have so many, Fortune 500 corporate companies really investing into studios like this for the AGMs, for internal communication, for customer briefings, for everything.
Absolutely, and we We absolutely see that in our research as Avixa with our more reports where we're looking at how people are, the technology that people are buying and how they're using it. So not so much what's going out of the door as how it's being applied. And ever since the pandemic, we've seen what was an existing trend really, really accelerate in terms of brands investing in their own broadcast studios, investing in their own broadcast capabilities, and integrating them with their collaboration capabilities. There is another side of it, though, which is brands starting to tell their own story from a marketing point of view. And so when you think about TV commercials, think about TV ads, and again, accelerating a trend that was already there, you can make a TV ad now for buttons, so long as you don't want it to be at halftime in the Super Bowl. Right? Because there's no way that the traditional networks would accept that. But if your target platform is TikTok or Instagram Reel, then it doesn't matter, right? You can just create an ad with very, very simple technology. You can edit it on your laptop, you can post it in minutes, and it's available to a global audience.
That's really cool. So as Avixa, I'm sure you have some market data. Could you share some of the stats with us?
Yeah, what we found is really ever since the pandemic hit, the percentage of enterprise companies that were investing in broadcast, there are two separate categories actually. One is broadcast studios and control rooms. The other one is content production and streaming, and it's just the way that our researchers group it, right? But those two things have been in the top 5 areas of investment, and it's a list of about 20 different applications. Those two things have been in the top 5 for enterprises ever since the pandemic. They kind of move up and down a little bit, but neither of them was there before the pandemic. They were kind of number 10, number 12, number 14, and that's the shift that we've seen, and it's global.
That's great. Could you just give us an idea how the global AV market in general is growing, just to see the picture?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you know, Florian, the AV market was a weird market back there over the last 2 or 3 years. You had some areas which were growing very fast, like collaboration, unified communications, video conferencing. And then you had other areas like traditional live in-person events, which essentially fell off a cliff, right?
Difficult, yes.
Very difficult. What we have now is live events coming back at an incredible pace, I think much more quickly than we anticipated.
We see it here at ISE.
Well, we're sitting here at ISE,
right,
here's a fantastic example of it, right? A show that even the ISE team themselves just could not have imagined that this show would be as successful as it has been, right? We thought that the shift back to in-person would be much more gentle, and it hasn't been. But then we've seen collaboration and communications technologies continue to be invested in with things like as the workplace goes from being a remote workplace to a hybrid workplace, then you see continued investment in things like Microsoft Teams rooms with these huge global deployments of these scalable conferencing and collaboration solutions. And so every sector of our market now is growing, and the only thing that's holding it back is the supply chain and perhaps two things: supply chain and shortage of labor. So not everybody can get the product that they need, and not everyone can get the people they need to deliver the product.
Yeah. And there's one fascinating thing here at ISE. It's really that sustainability and energy consumption. So it's becoming more and more important. So even you have these huge screens, there's ways of making it greener, more sustainable, right? In many ways.
Yeah, and some of that, funnily enough, has been driven by the supply chain. So I've spoken to a number of manufacturers here who've said, we've actually made our products smaller and lighter so that you need fewer pallets. And if you need fewer pallets, you need fewer containers. You need fewer containers, you need less fuel. So you have these kind of accidental consequences almost of the nightmare that we all went through with the pandemic, right? Because you see these consequences. And the other side of it, which is really, really interesting, which we had a speaker at our Global Partner Program event earlier this week. He was talking about the idea of AV hardware that never goes wrong. It's never obsolete, right? And it's just upgraded over time with software, and essentially you buy it as a service. And when finally it does become obsolete, it's recycled and it's replaced with a new one. But it's almost a product as a service. And I thought that was a fascinating concept. I don't think it's a reality yet, but what an interesting approach.
Oh, it's a vision. We see it in many other industries where like power by the hour eventually, could be a business model. It's still a long way to go, but it's a vision. I believe, it's also relevant for our industry.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about the rise of AV services for a long time, right? And in our research, every year the percentage of services versus products, that shifts, and it almost always shifts in the direction of services. That has kind of slowed down to a certain degree, but and that does vary across the world as well, because depending on where you are in the world, there's more of an appetite for managed services, and in other places things are done in house. But the idea of AV as a service, I think, kind of started to surface, in the last couple of years when we were in Amsterdam with ISE, and now it's definitely a reality, and you see it. It's essentially the subscription as a service model, taken from tech, right? Taken from Microsoft and those other brands that have shifted to that model, and you just extend it. You extend it from the software out into the broader AV integration.
Exciting developments. I think we have to wait for the next Infocom, next ISE, next shows. We'll see much more.
It'll come along sooner than we think, I'm sure.
Much more. Thank you. So Dan Goldstein, Chief Marketing Officer from Avixa. Thanks for being our guest today. Thank you.
My pleasure.